أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. أمسينا وأمسى الملك لله والحمد لله لا شريك له لا إله إلا هو إليه المصير. اللهم ما أمسى بنا من نعمة أو بأحد من خلقك فمنك وحدك لا شريك لك فلك الحمد ولك الشكر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. ما شاء الله. So what are we discussing today? Where did we stop last time? We covered the migration. We discussed the migration of the Prophet ﷺ, and we said that this was basically the biggest turning point of the, in the history of Islam after the revelation, because this really marked the beginning of the glorious era and the strength of the Islamic history. And that's what we discussed, that there's a reason why the Islamic calendar started with the migration. Did we discuss that? The calendar. No, we did not. Okay. So, the Islamic calendar, of course, starts with the migration. When did the Islamic calendar start, by the way? When did the Muslims start using a calendar? When did that happen? Yeah, the time of Umar alayhi ridwanullah. Specifically Umar, because his khilafah was relatively long compared to that of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, which is little more than 2 years. But Umar alayhi ridwanullah was there for about 10 years. So when he was sending basically the correspondence to the different regions in the Islamic khilafah, he would say, for example, the 12th of Rabi' al-Awwal or the 12th of Muharram, for example. But it would not say which year, so the people may have like a couple of messages from the same month, not knowing actually which comes first. That's when the idea came up that they have to start using a calendar. And they were trying to decide, he came up with the idea, Umar alayhi ridwanullah, trying to decide as to when will be the beginning of the calendar. What will be the beginning, year zero. And different suggestions were given. Some they said the birth of the Prophet, some they said the beginning of the revelation. And Ali radiallahu anhu suggested that the beginning has to be the migration, because it's the beginning of the period of strength of the Muslims. That's why the calendar starts with the migration as the beginning of the calendar. Now, when do they start? Of course, which is the first month in the Islamic calendar? Muharram. When did the Prophet migrate? He arrived to Medina in which month? In Rabi' al-Awwal. He arrived in Medina in Rabi' al-Awwal. Then why Muharram? That suggestion actually came from Uthman bin Affan alayhi ridwanullah. He said that we start the year from the time people return from Hajj. Of course, the last month on the Hijri calendar is Dhul-Hijjah. The first one afterward is Muharram. So in other words, the next month will be the beginning of the calendar. Hence, the beginning of the Islamic calendar is Muharram of the year of the migration. So the Muslims now they are actually in Mecca and of course in Medina, and the first thing that the Prophet ﷺ did are two things, and these are considered to be the basic bonds of Islam: the spiritual bond and the organizational bond. The spiritual bond, that's why the Prophet ﷺ, the first thing that he did is establish the masjid. The first thing that he did when he migrated to Medina is establish the masjid. And the masjid was not just a place for prayer and then you go back home. It was basically a center of all the activities. So what we have here, basically, in the US as the Islamic Center model, is something similar to what the Prophet did, alayhi salatu wasalam. So it was the focal place of activities actually for the Muslim community. And the second thing, the organizational bond, that's when the Prophet ﷺ made the Muhajirin and the Ansar into brothers, the immigrants as well as the people of Medina into brothers. So he paired them. He will be a brother with him, he will be a brother with her, and it was really a brotherhood even based on inheritance. So they used to even inherit one another until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala abrogated that after the battle of Badr, when Allah revealed that ulul arhami ba'duhum awla bi ba'd, that the people that are related to one another deserve each other's more. But this was from the beginning. The bond was established from the beginning. So there were three components that were the foundation of the Islamic society. First of all is the brotherhood, when he paired the people. The second thing is the connection to God, the spirituality and the prayer and all of that. The third is that he had a constitution. He had some kind of a declaration of a treaty and an agreement that indicates their relationship with one another, as well as the relationship with the non-Muslims that were living among them at that time. And keep in mind that Medina was not only inhabited by the Ansar. The Ansar, of course, they were the two main tribes of Al-Aws and Al-Khazraj. But there were also some Jewish tribes that were living in there. Some that were living inside of Medina, like Banu Auf, And the three main tribes of the Jewish tribes were living on the outskirts of Medina, and those were, anybody knows all three of them? Don't give me just one, all three of them. Okay, Kainuqa, Al-Nadir, Qurayza. So Qaynuqa, Al-Nadir, Banu Qaynuqa, Banu Al-Nadir, and Banu Qurayza. And the Prophet ﷺ had an agreement with them of mutual support, mutual defense. And basically that, and an important thing is that if anything happens, like the Muslims or the others have to pay a certain blood money, they will all chip in. And this was an important actually component in what happens later on, especially later on with Banu Nadir, that will come to it later on. So there was that mutual agreement, that basically that mutual defense, mutual support, and helping one another. And then, of course, in the first year and a half of Medina, which is a period of establishment, a few things happen. Few important things that happen. One of them is the changing of the Qibla, the direction of the Qibla. Now the Muslims, when they used to pray up till that point, they used to face Jerusalem, Bayt al-Maqdis. That was the direction of the Qibla. But then after the migration, within that period, the Qibla was moved toward Al-Masjid al-Haram in Mecca. So now the Qibla was moved. And one of the masjids, actually called Masjid al-Qiblatain, now the Masjid of the two Qibla, what happened is that the change happened, or the people learned of the change when they were in the middle of the Salat and the prayer. So they were in the middle of the Salat. The Prophet ﷺ received the revelation that the direction of prayer was moved from Jerusalem into Mecca. And then somebody went to them while they are in the middle of the prayer, and he told them that the Qibla was changed. That's what happened. The Imam basically reorganized the line, everything was reshuffled, and they faced a different direction. And that's why this masjid was known as Masjid al-Qiblatain, the masjid of the two Qibla, because of that practice in particular. Another thing that happened is the fasting of Ramadan. The legislation of the fasting of Ramadan was mandated actually at that time. Before that, when the Prophet ﷺ migrated to Medina, he found that the Jews were fasting on the 10th of Muharram, the day of Ashura. And that's why, by the way, we fast the day of Ashura. And he asked them, why do you fast on that day? Why are you fasting on that day? They said, because on that day, the 10th of Muharram, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved Moses and those that were with him and destroyed the Pharaoh. And the Prophet said that we deserve Moses more than they do. So he started basically asking the Muslims to fast that day, but to add to that a day before or a day after, to be different from the practice of the Jews of Medina. And that's why we fast on the 10th of Muharram, by the way. It has nothing to do with Karbala, which happened way after the death of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. A big calamity in our history, but it is not related to that practice. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved Musa alayhi salam on the 10th of Muharram. So the Muslims used to fast that. The Prophet commanded the Muslims to fast on that day. But when the fasting of Ramadan became fard, then that fasting of Muharram became optional. So that was optional, and of course that came down in the Surah Al-Baqarah when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. That fasting was mandated upon you as it was upon those before you, so you may attain piety. So this was the purpose, or one of the fruits of fasting, is to attain the God consciousness and the piety. Okay, so that all happened during that year and a half. And some of the analysts, actually the scholars of the Seerah, they said that one of the reasons actually that it happened that way, because it was meant to give the Muslim a distinct identity, which was culminated, so to speak, with the Battle of Badr. That it was not just ideological or theological, but it was also actually practical and political. So that was in a way completed with the Battle of Badr. So the Muslims basically, his identity was starting to crystallize, so to speak, and the uniqueness starting to crystallize in that period. A few events that happened that were not really of great significance during that period, until of course the main event that happened in Ramadan of the second year after the revelation. What's that event? After the migration. What's that event? I just said it. The Battle of Badr, right? And the interesting thing, of course, that you'll find that the three most significant events, the most significant events in the history of the Muslims happened during Ramadan. Anybody knows all three of them? Don't give me just one. Besides, anybody knows all three of them? The three most significant events, all of them happened in Ramadan. Anybody knows what these are? Nope. I need 3 of them. I need all 3 of them. So give me one. What? Pick me, pick me. Ya Allah, ya Ayman. Ya Abu Ibrahim. The revelation in Ramadan. The Battle of Badr. The conquest of Mecca, Fatah Mecca. All 3 of them actually happened in the month of Ramadan.
73 war when it was Ramadan.
What?
1973 war.
Yeah, that's more recent, right? Khair, inshallah. So that's really what happened, and that we're talking about, of course, the great battle of Badr. Now, what the significance of the battle of Badr is not because it was a big battle or it lasted like years. The whole battle actually lasted a little more than 2 hours. So it was a short battle. And the number of people that were involved were like 314 Muslims. So that's not that many. Against about 1,000 at the end after some of them actually returned back. So it was a small battle, but the significance of that is first of all strategic, because it established the Muslims at that time as a major broker of power in Arabia. It established them as not just basically a small group that is running away from oppression, but actually a major power, because they defeated what was known at that time as the biggest force in Arabia, which was Mecca. So for them to do that, it established their presence basically, and very strongly so. And the other thing is that you see that the whole battle was planned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as you will see in the steps. That, in other words, the Muslims, when they left Medina, they were not even leaving for a battle, they were leaving for something else. And then the whole thing actually turned into a battle. So the whole thing was planned by God from the beginning. And like I said, the significance of that is that it re-emphasized and established the presence of the Muslims as a major broker of power in Arabia at that time. What happened? It was a big temptation. Again, keep in mind that the Muslims were already at war with the people of Mecca. The people of Mecca basically kicked them out. They kicked them out of their own houses, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala up till that point kept on telling them not to fight back. So the command is not to retaliate. Despite the oppression, despite the persecutions, the Muslims were commanded not to retaliate, not to respond back. So it was a period more than anything else of establishing self-control and spirituality and connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because you can imagine that despite the pressure of them basically to fight back, somebody's attacking you, somebody's killing you, somebody's persecuting you, but still you do not hit back. Wallah, can I get some water? Allah barik fik. Is not to hit back. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kept on asking them not to hit back until the command came after the migration, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أذن للذين يقاتلون بأنهم ظلموا وأن الله على نصرهم لقدير وأن الله على نصرهم لقدير الذين أخرجوا من ديارهم بغير حق إلا أن يقولوا ربنا الله. So this in a way indicating why the fighting is there. So Allah is saying to them that now those that were fought by the others are given the permission, because of the injustice that was given to them. In other words, Allah is saying that the permission was not given to them to aggress, but they were actually already being fought. أُذِنَ لِلَّذِينَ يُقَاتَلُونَ بِأَنَّهُمْ ظُلِمُوا. That those that were already fought were given the permission because they were being dealt with unjustly, because they were against. And Allah says, الَّذِينَ أُخْرِجُوا مِنْ دِيَارِهِمْ بِغَيْرِ حَقٍّ. Those who were kicked out of their own dwellings and their own houses unjustly, only because they said God is our Lord. So Allah is saying that this is why the permission was given to them. Again, not to aggress or anything. Allah yajzik al-khair. Allah yajzikum bil-jannah inshallah. Ajma'een. Ameen. Say. So what happened? They were already anyway in that state of war with the people of Mecca. And keep in mind that when they left with all of their properties, without any of their properties, all of their wealth, all of their money was left behind. So meanwhile, something actually was happening in Mecca. What happened? The aunt of the Prophet ﷺ, whose name was Atika, she saw a dream. And in that dream, she saw that a big rock is running or falling over Mecca, and it shatters into small rocks, and each house in Mecca is hit by a piece of that shattered rock. And they started basically talking about that dream. Meanwhile, Abu Jahl heard of that dream. In other words, they were concerned that something wrong could be happening. because of that dream. It was very strongly symbolic and very vivid, so they felt that it has some kind of a significance or indicator. Then Abu Jahl, sarcastically, he said that there are too many prophets appearing in the family of Abdul Muttalib. In other words, first we had Muhammad, and now we have Atika and whatnot. And he started basically making fun of them. And then he said that we'll wait for 3 days to see what happens. If nothing happens in 3 days that confirms that dream, then we will declare to everybody that the family of Abdul Muttalib are the biggest liars. So anyway, everybody was waiting to see whether anything will happen after 3 days. Meanwhile, Abu Sufyan, one of the leaders of Mecca, was returning from the Levantine area with a huge caravan, 1,000 loaded camels with a lot of gold and a lot of silver, a lot of provisions. And they said that every house in Mecca had a share in that caravan. They chipped in. So in other words, everybody had a concern, including the Muslims, by the way, including the Muslims that were kicked out. So everybody had a share in that, and this whole caravan was guarded only by 40 people. And now look at the temptations. So the Prophet ﷺ, through his sources, heard of that caravan of Mecca, again, who was at war with the Muslims. And he thought that if he can take over that caravan, it would be a big economic blow to the kuffar of Quraysh, and also it would recover some of the things that the Muslims were taken away from, what was taken away from the Muslims themselves. Because again, keep in mind, we mentioned the story of Suhaib, a Roman, that how when he left, they forced him to leave all of his wealth behind. So the Muslims left, they said even the house of the Prophet ﷺ, the house that he was living in Mecca, was taken and assaulted by his cousin Aqil. So everything that they had was taken away. So the Prophet thought that by that they'll be able to recover some of what they owe, what the others actually owe them. And also it was a big economic blow to the people of Mecca. So what he decided is he called among the Muslims that we're going to take over the caravan. And he made it optional because there was not a war. In other words, whoever wants to come with me can go with me, and then some people can stay behind. And with them, 314 left. So 314 Muslims left with him on that journey, mostly from the Ansar. There were 76 from the Muhajirin, and the rest 238 from the Ansar. So 76 and 238, and they only had 70 camels and 2 horses. So obviously it was not prepared for a war. And they were alternating, by the way. So the Prophet ﷺ, him and Ali and Abu Lubaba were alternating on a camel. So that camel, in other words, one will ride, the 2 other will walk, one will ride, and they will switch. And they told initially to the Prophet that, why don't you we'll give you our turn, and you'll be the one riding, and we'll just walk. And the Prophet said basically that you don't need the reward from God more than I do. And look at his humbleness. In other words, he's a prophet, but he said, that's it. I need it as much as you do. So they kept on alternating. And the whole thing was a distance of 160 kilometers. So that's about maybe like 70 miles or something like that. So mostly actually walking, but also riding at times. So the Muslims basically left them there. The Prophet ﷺ appointed in charge of Medina at that time, Abdullah ibn Maktoum. Who was Abdullah ibn Maktoum? Who was known for something? He was a blind companion. And subhanAllah, this shows you, by the way, this is really an important, by the way, principle that the Prophet had, that he would never hold a person for any past event, so to speak, or hold a grudge against anyone. Now here's Abdullah ibn Maktoum that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blamed the Prophet for. عَبَسَ وَانْتَوَلَّى أَنْ جَاءَهُ الْأَعْمَى وَمَا يُدْرِكَ لَعَلَّهُ يَزَّكَّى. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was blaming him for that, but still the Prophet honored him. And not only that, but the Prophet used to call him مَرْحَبًا بِالَّذِي عَاتَبَنِي بِهِ رَبِّي. That whenever he would see him, he would say that I welcome the one for whom Allah has blamed me. In other words, this is it. And this is the humbleness of the Prophet. That the Prophet ﷺ was teaching his companions, وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ, when Allah praised him, but he was also teaching them عَبَسَ وَتَوَلَّى. This shows you his humbleness ﷺ, and the great character that he had.
So the surah Watawalle came before the battle?
Yes. This was a Mecca surah, before the migration actually. It was about Abdullah ibn Maktoum, the blind companion. So the Prophet appointed Abdullah ibn Maktoum, the blind companion, in charge of Medina initially when he left. Now also something happened. The Prophet ﷺ asked Uthman bin Affan to stay behind. Even though Uthman bin Affan wanted to go with him, but he asked him to stay behind for a reason, because his wife was very sick. The wife of Uthman bin Affan was very sick, and he was to take care of her. Who was the wife of Uthman bin Affan? What? Which daughter? One of the four. It was Ruqayya. Ruqayya, the daughter of Uthman bin Affan, was sick. So the Prophet asked him, because some people say that, well, Uthman bin Affan did not go to Badr with the Prophet. Well, he did not go with the Prophet because the Prophet asked him not to. Because he was tending his wife, or tending to the needs of his wife, Ruqayya, who died not long afterward, by the way. And Uthman bin Affan, of course, he was known as Uthman Dhin Nurayn, or Uthman with the two lights. Why was he called that? Because he married two of the Prophet's daughter. Of course, the second one after the first one died. So the first one is Ruqayya. Who was the second one? One of the three. It was Kulthum. Zainab and Fatima, the others were married. Zainab, so these are the other three. So anyway, Uthman bin Affan actually left in there. And meanwhile, Abu Sufyan was a very skilled leader, the one who was leading the caravan. The 1,000 loaded camels with only 40 people actually guarding it. So he was really concerned. The Prophet ﷺ started sending people to look around for information, to know actually which way the caravan is going, because Abu Sufyan made a conscious decision not to take the normal route, because he knew that his caravan was very poorly protected, and anyone can take over. So he tried to take a different route. So the Prophet ﷺ started sending people to get some information. So among the people that he sent two men somewhere, and to look for information. A man from a distance, a Bedouin that was sitting there, like an information booth or something. A Bedouin sitting from a distance saw these two men coming, checking something, and then they left. Abu Sufyan started also going around himself, trying to check for anything dangerous. So he saw that Bedouin, and he asked him, "Did you see anything strange?" He said, "No, there were just two men that came. They sat in there for a little bit, and then they left." Then Abu Sufyan went to where they were, and he checked, the excrement, the feces of the camel, the camel's excrements, and he opened them, and he found in them the seeds of the dates that grow in Medina. And he knew that this was the army of Muhammad. So in other words, he knew that, well, now the Muslims are coming after me, through looking at that. So immediately he sent a person by the name of Dumdum ibn Amr into Mecca to warn them. And Dumdum ibn Amr, even his name sounds like he's someone who's skilled in mass media, really good at promoting. So what Dumdum ibn Amr did, before he entered Mecca, he wounded his own nose, got some blood and put it on his clothes. He says he cut the nose of his horse, and then spread blood all over himself and the horse and whatever. And he started running in Mecca, screaming and shouting, Al-Latima, Al-Latima, Al-Qafil, Al-Qafil, Al-Amwal, that basically the calamity, the problems, the money and everything. And everybody started going around him, asking him, behind him, what's happening? And he would not respond. Until a big number of people gathered around him. That's when he told them that Muhammad and his army is coming after our caravan. And that happened 3 days after the dream of Atika bint Abdul Muttalib that we mentioned actually earlier. It's exactly the same thing. It's the fulfillment of the dream of Atika bint Abdul Muttalib. At that time, then the people of Mecca prepared a big army, and they were waiting for that. In other words, to them, this is a chance to kill the Muslims, be done with them once and for all. And they made a huge army. They formed a huge army, about 1,300 initially. 1,300. How many were the Muslims? 314, 370, by the way, different narrations, but that's the number, about 300, a little more than 300. So here we're talking about 1,300 from the people of Mecca, and with them there were 200 horses versus 2 for the Muslims, and they said 600 shields and a large, huge number in the hundreds of camels. And off toward the battle. Now, among the interesting thing is that one of the people in that army, Umayyah ibn Khalaf, he did not want to go. Umayyah ibn Khalaf, he did not want to go with the army. Why? Because when Muhammad ﷺ was still in Mecca, once he was passing by Umayyah ibn Khalaf, and Umayyah ibn Khalaf told him that basically, when we meet you in the battlefield, we will kill you. And Prophet Muhammad told him, no, we will kill you, inshallah. It is us who will kill you in the battlefield. And he used to trust Prophet Muhammad. That's the interesting thing, is that whenever Muhammad will say anything, they will trust it, even though they would not believe in him. So he did not want to go actually out, because he was afraid of meeting the Muslims in the battlefield. Until a person, one of his friends, came to him when he was sitting, and he gave him a small plate to bring some jamr, burning coals. And he says, go, basically, you are a servant or something like that, bring us something like that, because he refused to go out with them. And then he told them that basically, may God curse you or something, and he decided to go with them. And of course he was killed in that battle. Yeah. So anyway, now the army, of course, left under the leadership of Abu Jahl. He was a general commander of the army, and then going out to meet the Muslims. As they were going in there, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ decided basically to go now himself with Abu Bakr as-Siddiq to get some information. And they saw some people that were sitting, and they asked a person, a Bedouin who was there. See, the Bedouins are really skilled, the people of the desert, into knowing directions, getting something, information, God knows how, So he asked him, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, Abu Bakr asked the man, do you know where Muhammad is? Of course, he is Muhammad ﷺ. And now, do you know where the Muslims are? And the man said, well, Muhammad and his people are today, according to my assessment, in that particular place. And it was the exact place where the Muslims were. Now the Prophet, why did he ask him that? To establish his credibility, whether his information is credible or not. In other words, well, he's accurate. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, do you know anything about Quraysh? And the man said, well, Quraysh's army left at that time, and according to my assessment, they should be in that place today. It's the first time now the Prophet heard of the army of Quraysh coming in. So that changes everything. And then he asked him, do you know anything about the caravan, about Abu Sufyan? And the man said, I don't know anything about Abu Sufyan, where he is. Which shows you that the skills of Abu Sufyan, he was able basically to go in a way where nobody would guess what he was going through. So now everything changes. So the Prophet ﷺ went back to the Muslims, and he asked them. He gathered the Muslims and he said to them, now this is the situation now. It's not the caravan anymore. Now we have a whole army that is facing us. Ashiru alayya ayyuhan nas. Give me your opinion, O people. First, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq alayhi ridwanullah stood up and then said to the Prophet that we're supporting you no matter what you do. His companions. In other words, whatever you do, we'll go with you. Whatever you decide, we'll go with you. And the Prophet ﷺ praised him, made dua for him, and he asked him to sit down and repeated the request. Ashiru alayya ayyuhan nas. What do you think I should do? Then Umar ﷺ stood up and he repeated something similar to that. That we're supporting you no matter what you decide. And the Prophet also praised him and asked him to sit down. Then a third person, and he repeated the request. A third person, Al-Muqdad ﷺ, he repeated the same thing. We're supporting you wherever you go. And the Prophet asked him to sit down. Now why did the Prophet ask the three of them to sit down? Because all three of them were from the immigrant, from the Muhajirin. And now that the Prophet knows them, he's giving them mentorship and tarbiyah for 13 years. He knows what they can do. But he was concerned about the newcomers. He was concerned about Al-Ansar, which make up the bulk of the army. Keep in mind. And then Sa'd ibn Mu'ad alayhi ridwanullah stood up and he says, Ya Rasulullah, do you mean us? Do you want to hear from us? And the Prophet said yes. And he said, Sa'd ibn Mu'ad alayhi ridwanullah, he said that, Ya Rasulullah, even if you take us through the ocean, we will follow you. And we will not tell you what the Israelites said to Moses go and your Lord, go fight with your Lord, we're waiting in here, we will tell you wherever you take us, we will fight with you. And the Prophet ﷺ said to them, then I give you the glad tidings of one of the good things. In other words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you, al-nasr or shahada, victory or martyrdom, but He says that Allah promised me one of the two, either the army or the caravan. So you're going to get one of the two. In other words, you're winning no matter what. Meanwhile, the Prophet ﷺ started again looking for more information. And he sent among the people Ali bin Abi Talib, Zubair ibn al-Awwam, and Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas to get some information. And what they did, as they were going scouting, they found 2 servants from the army of Mecca, 2 servants fetching some water. So they grabbed them and they brought them to the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet, meanwhile, when they came in, he was praying. He was actually praying. So they asked the 2 guys, the 2 servants, are you from the army or are you from the caravan? Of course they want, what do they want? Do they want the army or the caravan? So the two guys will say, we're from the army. They were honest. Then they started basically beating them. No, you're lying. You're from the caravan. They said, okay, we're from the caravan. And they stopped beating them. And they said, well, but we're from the army. Then they started beating them. The Prophet was hearing that in the prayer. And when he finished, and the Prophet said, subhanallah, when they tell you the truth, you beat them. When they lie to you, you stop. They are from the army. Why were they doing that? It shows you that the Muslims did not want to fight. In other words, when Sa'd ibn Mu'adh and Abu Bakr and Umar and al-Muqdad said to the Prophet, we'll fight with you no matter where you go. Did everybody want to fight? Did the other Muslims all want to fight? And the answer is no, they did not. And Allah says that in the Quran, وَتَوَدُّونَ أَنَّ غَيْرَ ذَاتِ الشَّوْكَةِ تَكُونُ لَكُمْ, that you want the caravan, you do not want the army. In other words, they don't want the army, they want the caravan. But however, despite the fact, Allah says, وَتَوَدُّونَ أَنَّ غَيْرَ الشَّوْكَةِ تَكُونُ لَكُمْ, despite the fact that they did not want to fight, but they obeyed the Prophet ﷺ. That's why they were so great. That they obeyed the Prophet ﷺ when they themselves did not want to do it. That's what earned them the great status in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So here the Prophet ﷺ told them that basically they are from the army. This is it. This is the reality. That's what we are in for. And the Prophet asked the 2 servants, how many camels do you slaughter each day? And they said, we slaughter, 9 to 10. By the way, something happened before that, before this instance, is that Abu Sufyan was able to pass safely. And he sent a message to the leader of the army of Mecca that, I'm safe, you can go back. In other words, you don't have to fight anymore. And then Abu Jahl, the leader of the army, said, no, we're not going to stop him there. We're going to teach those Muslims a big lesson, which you think strategically is the right step. He says, yet we will go, we will defeat them, we will sing, we will dance, we will drink, we'll do whatever until everybody knows that we are basically something to be reckoned with, that nobody was to approach any of our caravans. But 300 plus of the people in the army managed to return back. So those that were left with the army of Mecca now, out of 1,300 now, is between 900 and 1,000. So again, back to the story of the 2 men that were caught by the Muslims. The Prophet asked them, how many camels do you slaughter a day? They said, we slaughter 9 to 10. So with a calculation, the Prophet said, then the army of Mecca is between 900 to 1,000. This is what it is. Based on how much people normally eat, how many people eat out of a camel. So the number is 900 to 1,000, which of course is the exact number. So the Prophet ﷺ then, he gathered the army and they marched toward in the direction of Badr. And what happened is that at that time, the army of Mecca was about to return back. I said the 300 that left. There are other people that were trying actually to go back until Abu Jahl asked a person whose son was killed by the Muslim, his name is Amir ibn al-Hadrami, to go say something. And Amir al-Hadrami also seems to be skilled. He started calling, Wa Amra, oh son of mine, nobody cares about me, nobody worries about me, go, everybody leaves, I'll go and fight them by myself. So he was able to have some impact basically in the way that he was, basically motivating the people. And they decided to stay in there. And of course to motivate them even more, then Abu Jahl started making dua. to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, Allahumma aftah baynana wa baynahum. Ya Allah, give victory to one of us. And he says that, Ya Allah, whoever's on the truth, give him victory. And Allah did. Eventually the Muslims actually are the ones that won really the battle. So meanwhile, this is now the night, and Allah says, إِن تَسْتَفْتُحُ فَقَدْ جَاءَكُمُ الْفَتْحِ. If you're asking for that, Allah is going to send it to you. So this is the night before the battle. So the Muslims now reach the land of Badr, and the other army was approaching. Initially, the Muslims actually were camping before. Who was the Sahabi? What's his name? Habab bin Mundhir. The army of the Muslims were camping before the water. See, the land of Badr had some wells, some water. And the Muslims were camping behind the water. Then Habab bin Mundhir, one of the great Sahaba asked the Prophet, that Ya Rasulullah, why did you stop in here? Is this something that Allah commanded you to do? Or is it just basically skills of worship, And the Prophet says, no, it's just basically my own assessment. And look at the manners of the Sahaba of the Prophet. They would not give their opinion. First they will check, is this something that Allah wants? If it is, then they will not say anything. So the Prophet told them, no, it's just basically my own subjective assessment. And the man says, Ya Rasulullah, it will be better if we camp before the water. This way we'll have control over the water, and they will not have access over that. And the Prophet ﷺ accepted that. He agreed to that. And the Muslims camped with the water basically behind them. This way they had control over the well and that whole land. The night before, the Muslims all actually fell asleep. It was something that fell asleep, and the rain came down very lightly over them. The side of the Muslims was more sandy. The land was more sandy. So the light rain made the land firm under their feet. The side of the other group was more soil. And it rained heavily, which made the whole thing muddy, basically. So again, you see how the whole thing was planned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the beginning. That how the army, how the whole thing, the plan, the Muslims were pulled into that thing, they were not planning that, and how the whole thing that happened before that. So the Muslims, Assalamu alaikum. Wallah, if these sisters inshallah can keep quiet. Assalamu alaikum upstairs. Hey inshallah, jazakumullah khair. So basically the Muslims, Assalamu alaikum, yeah sisters in the back. Khalas, that's fine. Nobody's here. So what happened, again, the night before, the Muslims actually fell asleep, and a light rain made the land firm under their feet. And the following day, the Prophet ﷺ lined everybody up, and he asked everybody basically to all line up. Nobody wants to be nobody's to step basically in front of the army. But there was one companion, a great companion, who has a big, a big protrusion, a big belly. And he was in line, but of course his belly was sticking out. So the Prophet ﷺ, with a tiny stick, he asked him that, step back, you're in the front. And the man says, Ya Rasulullah, awja'tani, you hurt me, and I want punishment from you. Oh, the Sahaba, what are you talking about? Punishment from the Prophet? He says, yes, my right. And the Prophet says, yes, he's right, go ahead and hit me. And the man's belly was exposed, so the Prophet hit him on his skin. So the Prophet says, okay, hit me back. And the man said, nope, on the skin, just like you did to me. So the Prophet uncovered his belly, basically, for him to hit him back. And the man just jumped on him and he started basically hugging him. What are you doing? And the man says, Ya Rasulullah, you know what we're getting into, and I may not live beyond today. So I want the last thing that I experience is that I touch your skin. That's how much they love the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ, again, he was in the army organizing the lines. Then Sa'd ibn Mu'adh ﷺ suggested to the Prophet basically to have a certain tent or a trellis behind the army. Why? He said to him, normally the Prophet is always in the forefront of the army, by the way. Ali bin Abi Talib ﷺ used to say, كان إذا حمي الوطيس احتمينا برسول الله فلم يكن منا أحد أقرب إلى عدوه منه. That whenever the fighting intensifies, we will always seek refuge next to the Prophet, for none of us will be closer to his enemy than the Prophet will be to his. But in this battle in particular, it was a little different. Why? Sa'd ibn Mu'adh says to the Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, there are some people back in Medina who did not know that we were coming to a battle. And we don't want something to happen to you and for them to be deprived of you, basically, if something happens to you. So he said, why don't you have a certain trellis, a tent, a shade structure behind the army for yourself, or you can rest. But the Prophet ﷺ was fighting with them. Eventually he was fighting with them, ﷺ, and he was taking the leadership. So the Prophet ﷺ went to that shady place, and he started making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says ibtihal, raising his hand really high, and imploring Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, saying, Allahumma an tahlika hadhihi al-usba falan tu'bada fil ard. He says that, Ya Allah, if this group of Muslims die, then you will not be worshipped on this earth. In other words, this is the essence. These are the people that matter. Again, imploring Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, insisting that this is the group, this is the hope basically for this message. And he kept on making dua, and Abu Bakr as-Siddiq will tell him that, Ya Rasulullah, take it easy on yourself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never let you down. But again, the Prophet was aware of what's at stake. Again, all these great Sahaba alayhi who are the hope of this ummah, were basically at stake of being basically, especially knowing that the number of the army of the enemies are like folds, 3 times that of the Muslims. And the Prophet ﷺ took a short nap, actually, fell asleep before the battle. And when he woke up, he told Abu Bakr as-Siddiq that, Ya Abu Bakr, Allah gave me the glad tidings, the good news. Allah sent him a dream, the glad tidings, and he showed me where each of the people will die. So Utbah will die in here, Shaybah will die in here, Abu Jahl will die in there. And he started naming to him basically all the places that the people will die. And he told him the great news that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sending angels to fight with them. Because Jibreel alayhi salam came to him, Gabriel came to him shortly after, and he told him that, Ya Rasulullah, Ya Muhammad, I came with a group of angels that are ready to fight with you. That's why it is believed that the Battle of Badr is the only battle where the angels actually participated in the fighting. Now they came down in the Battle of Hunayn to scare the disbelievers, but did not fight. The only one when they actually fought is the Battle of Badr. Again, to indicate clearly that everything is planned by Allah and everything is guaranteed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The results are already guaranteed. So the Prophet ﷺ was giving the glad tidings actually of where it happens, and then shortly before the battle, then it started with a duel. 3 men from Mecca, Al-Walid ibn Utbah, Utbah ibn Rabi'ah, and Shaybah ibn Rabi'ah. 3 strong horsemen, knights actually, capable horsemen from Mecca, came asking for 3 men to face them. Initially, 3 young companions went, Mu'ad and Sa'd ibn Afra, and a 3rd person. And then they said that, send us people that are our match. And the Prophet ﷺ sent 3 people from his own family. He said, Qum ya Ali. Ali stood up, and Ali was to face Al-Walid ibn Utbah. Qum ya Hamza was to face Shaybah, and Qum ya Ubaydah ibn al-Harith ibn Abd al-Muttalib also to face the 3 others. And in the beginning of the battle, Ali was able to kill his opponent. Hamza was able to kill his opponent. Ubaydah ibn al-Harith was hit by his opponent, but then he hit him back and he killed him, and then both died shortly after. Ubaydah died shortly after. But in the beginning of the battle, it started with 3 of the biggest heroes of the other armies actually being killed. And all the Muslims were shouting, Allahu Akbar, because how the whole thing actually started. And initially, the Muslims were actually asked to throw the arrows, and then in no time, quickly, the armies actually met, and in a little more than 2 hours, the battle was completed, was finished. It was a unanimous defeat. It was a unanimous defeat of Mecca, and they started running in all directions. 14 of the Muslims were killed. 6 from the Muhajirin, 8 from the Ansar. But among the other armies, 70 people were killed, and 70 people fell prisoners in the hand of the Muslims. Among the people that were killed of the Kuffar, of course, I mentioned Utbah and Shaybah and Walid ibn Utbah, but also among the people who were killed was Umayyah ibn Khalaf. Umayyah ibn Khalaf, the one that I mentioned, did not want to go fight. Now, who was Umayyah, by the way? He was known for something. Who was he? He was a slave master of Bilal bin Rabah, alayhi ridwanullah. He was a slave master of Bilal bin Rabah, and it was Bilal that killed him in the battle, actually. When he saw him, he says, Umayyah, la najitu idh naja. That this is Umayyah, Ra'sul Kufr, la najitu idh naja. That may I never be saved if he gets saved. And he's the one that killed him, actually. Bilal bin Rabah, the one who was tortured with a big rock put on his chest, his own slave is the one that killed him in the battlefield. So the whole battle actually was finished in no time. Like I said, in little more than 2 hours, but it changed everything now. The whole reality of Arabia now is different because of that. Of course, nobody knew what was happening, neither in Mecca nor in Medina. People did not know actually what was happening. So what happened, the Prophet ﷺ, to tell the people of Mecca, of Medina, he sent Zubayr ibn al-Awwam and somebody else on his own camel, the camel of the Prophet ﷺ, al-Qaswa, and he asked him to go basically back and tell the people. And when those people reach Mecca, when those people reach Mecca, the first thing that they started shouting, قتل عتبة الكافر, قتل أمية الكافر, قتل شيبة الكافر, قتل أبو جهل الكافر. So they started naming the people of the other army that were killed. And people did not believe, what's happening in there. But the Jews of Medina, some of them, they started spreading the rumor. They saying that, no, actually Muhammad was killed. Look, they came on his own camel. And when Zubayr and the other companion knew of that, they told them that, okay, we're going to tell the Prophet when he comes. They said, okay, no, we're changed, we're good, everything is cool. And they stopped actually spreading these rumors. Meanwhile, of course, it was the biggest catastrophe in Mecca. Because now their biggest leaders, all of them basically were killed. Abu Lahab, by the way, did not go. Abu Lahab did not basically go in the battle to fight with them, but what he did, instead of going with them, he bought a slave, he freed him, and he asked him to go basically on his behalf to the battle. But Abu Lahab, died shortly after that battle out of distress and sadness, and he got sick, that his own family basically left him to die. But all the leaders of Mecca now are being killed. The only one that was left was Abu Sufyan. So Abu Sufyan now became the big leader of Mecca. Now again, 70 people were killed from the other army and 70 fell prisoners. And the Prophet ﷺ, with the 70 prisoners, he would sometimes, trade them with some prisoners of the Muslims or release them for some ransom. Or he would ask them that if you teach the Muslims, a certain number of Muslims, you will be freed. So that's the Prophet ﷺ, how he treated the prisoners. But like I said, with that battle, then everything changed. Everything changed. Now the balance of power is completely shifted in Arabia, and the Muslims are a major power to be reckoned with. It would change everything from then on. Okay? So inshallah, I would stop in here, see if any questions or comment that we can entertain.
You mentioned the Malaika fought with the Muslims only in the Battle of Badr.
Yes.
That was a kind of
They toppled the tent, they toppled the pots, but they did not fight. They did not fight. And the Prophet, and they asked the Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, how do we know if somebody was killed by us or by basically one of the angels? And the Prophet says that the angels fight with swords of fire. So if you find signs of burning, it would have been killed by the angels and not by you. And it says that sometimes some of the Sahaba in the middle of the battlefield, before they even reach to kill one of their enemies, they'll find that the person actually dies. And an interesting story that happened is that Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, among the prisoners, was Al-Abbas, the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ. He was fighting on the other side, at that time, and he was big. He was, big and strong and all of that. But Abdullah ibn Mas'ud is known to be very tiny, very tiny Sahabi. They said that his legs were like sticks, that if the wind blows strong, it will just throw him off. And the Sahaba used to laugh at how tiny his legs were. But the Prophet told them that you're laughing at his legs, they're heavier than the mountain of Uhud in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Abdullah Mas'ud was one of the greatest companions. So what happened at the end of the battle, here comes this big, strong and mighty Al-Abbas, and he was taken by hand among the prisoners by the tiny Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. And they asked him, well, how could you do that? And Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, he said, I just grabbed my hand and asked him to come with me, and he followed me. The Prophet ﷺ said it was an angel that helped you do that. That's what Abbas said, when Abdullah ibn Mas'ud held my hand, I felt he was about to crush it. It was actually an angel who was helping him do that. Any other comment? Yes?
What is the Sakina?
Sakina means tranquility. Tranquility and serenity. So Allah sent down His tranquility over the Muslims at that time, before the battle.
How did they deal with prisoners?
With what? The prisoners, I told you that either they exchange him, they release them, and when somebody normally, by the way, the Prophet was very forgiving. If anybody basically asked him or implored him to release him, he would do that, alayhi salatu wasalam. Or he asked some that if anybody knows how to read and write, that they will teach the Muslims how to read and write, and they will earn their freedom that way.
I forget his name. There was one of the Quraysh, who never became Muslim, but he assisted the Muslims in their time of need. And
In the time of what?
In the time of Mecca.
Something happening here, by the way. Oh, the clock? Okay.
Basically what it comes to is that when the Muslims were discussing what to do with the prisoners, the Prophet said that had this man still been alive, and he asked me to release them, I would release them for this sake.
I forgot, wallahi, I forgot. But the Prophet was always like that. In other words, he was always forgiving and accommodating. So he would always basically try to connect with the other. And he repeated that, by the way, even before the Hudaybiyah treaty. He says if Mecca, even though they were at war with the Prophet, Quraysh were at war with the Prophet, he says, if they call me to anything that will save lives and keep a connection, I will respond to them. So war was not the purpose. That's why, again, keep in mind the verse. Allah says, أُذِنَ الَّذِينَ يُقَاتَلُونَ بِأَنَّهُمْ ظُلِمُوا. So the reason they're fighting back is because they were fought to start with. They're defending, actually. They're defending بِأَنَّهُمْ ظُلِمُوا وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَى نَصْرِهِمْ لَقَدِيرٌ. But they were kicked out of their own homes إِلَّا أَن يَقُولُوا رَبُّنَا اللَّهُ, because they're saying that Allah is our Lord.
I thought Umar has a different opinion.
Initially, yes. He said that Umar was known for his toughness, that he says that basically we want to kill them all. But the Prophet ﷺ was lenient toward the opinion of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. This is the big thing, by the way, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, مَا كَانَ لِنَبِيٍّ أَن يَكُونَ لَهُ أَسْرَى حَتَّى يُثْخِنَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. That the blame that Allah sent was not that why did you not kill them, but why did you take prisoners? In other words, some of them should have been killed in the battlefield, especially those that were actually killing. And that was one of the instances, by the way, those instances was that of Umayyah ibn Khalaf. Umayyah was just killing, but when he found himself basically about to lose it, that's when he surrendered to Abdullah ibn Auf. But then at that time it was too late. Bilal ibn Rabah was coming after him.
Do you know the two kids, one kid, two brothers?
Yes, Sa'd ibn Afra and Mu'adh ibn Afra. What happened is that they're like two young kids, like in their late teens, where they were fighting actually next to Abdurrahman ibn Auf. And they were fighting with him, and he said that wherever I go, I find them next to me, around me. And then one of them basically started telling me, like almost in a discreet way, not wanting the other to hear, that Ya uncle. So they were really young. He says, do you know where Abu Jahl is? And the man says, what do you need from Abu Jahl? He says, Wallah, I heard that he insulted the Prophet. And he was really, tough against the Prophet, so I'm going to kill him because of that. And he says that his brother basically was sneaking, trying to eavesdrop, trying to listen to what's going on. And he says, then I saw from a distance Abu Jahl fighting, and around him like many tall men, he says like tall like palm trees, surrounding him, and other guarding him. So I told him, it's that man over there. He says in no time the two of them went like two arrows basically toward him, and they were basically wounded severely in the process, and they kept on fighting their way until basically they both were able to stab him at that time, which he died later eventually, but he was fatally wounded, but he died actually a little after the battle. And the Prophet said to them that you both basically killed him.
So they did manage to kill him.
Yes, Sa'd ibn Afra and Mu'adh ibn Afra.
But they got killed in the process.
Well, I think one of them was killed.
One was killed later.
One of them was killed, one of them was killed later.
But Abdullah ibn Mas'ud finished the job.
Abdullah ibn Mas'ud finished the job. لَقَدْ ارْتَقَيْتَ مُرْتَقًا صَعْبًا يَا رُوَعِيَّ الْغَنَمِ. He says Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, basically when he saw him, he was very tiny, and Abu Jahl was really big and huge, that at the end he climbed on him. And he said to him, لَقَدْ ارْتَقَيْتَ مُرْتَقًا صَعْبًا يَا رُوَعِيَّ الْغَنَمِ, that, oh, you're like little insignificant shepherd, you climbed something significant. And he died at the end. Yes. Let me see if somebody else, otherwise I'll come back.
Question about the Salah participation. Them participating in Badr was purely, let's call it, going the extra mile for them, right? Because this was beyond their agreement with the Prophet, right?
Jazakallah khair. And that's, by the way, one of the reasons why the Prophet was asking them beginning. When the Prophet says, Ashiru alayya ayyuhan nas, tell me what you do of people. Because keep in mind, in the second battle of Al-Aqaba, that the pledge that the people of Medina gave him is that we will protect you inside of Medina. But now it's changing. In other words, it's an added thing. In other words, well, you're fulfilling the pledge, but now we're outside of Medina. But they told them that we'll go with you. And of course, by the way, the people of Badr are considered to be the greatest of all the Muslims. The Prophet ﷺ, at the end of the battle, Gabriel came to him and he said to him, مَا تَعَدُّونَ أَهْلَ بَدْرٍ فِيكُمْ? What do you consider the people of Badr among you? And the Prophet says, those are the greatest of all the Muslims. And Gabriel said, and so are the angels that participated in that battle. That's why the people of Badr have a special status, up to the point that even when one of them performed an act of treason before the conquest of Mecca, what's his name? Hatib ibn Abi Balta'a. And he said to him that Allah may have looked at the people, the Prophet says Allah has looked at the people of Badr and said, whatever you do, I've forgiven everything in advance to you. So the people of Badr have a special status, are the greatest of all the Muslims. Among the Sahaba, the greatest are the people of Badr. Okay, any other question or comments?
So yeah, came here. Exactly what did they see dream before?
Or his aunt? She saw actually that a certain rock is rolling into Mecca, and the rock shatters, and every house in Mecca is hit by a piece of that rock, which was fulfilled by that, because every house in Mecca has a share in that caravan, has a share in the caravan that Abu Sufyan was bringing forth. Okay, خير إن شاء الله. جزاكم الله خير. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر.